Big-time responses from the Toronto Maple Leafs and Edmonton Oilers in Game 4 have both Steele and I fired up for Game 5 between all of those teams set to do battle on Friday night. We got bets, previews, and of course, all of the veteran talent that you need to have your eye on headed into next season's draft. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome back.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele Roden. You can find his work all across YouTube, including NHL Quick Hits, and, of course, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And I'm your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. You've seen me all across the NHL world, The Score, CBC, Narcity Media, and hopefully you've been making us your first listen every single day, and thank you for doing that. Today, we are talking a lot about Steele big-time responses. Edmonton Oilers punch back. Toronto Maple Leafs squeak one out and punch back. But we're also looking forward a little bit to next season's draft. Some NHL veterans that can still get it done that we've been impressed by, that I think will still hold a lot of value. Is Joseph Woll the starter for the Leafs next season? We're going to talk about that as well. Excited for today's episode, Steele big-time bets to wrap up the show as well. What was your takeaway? There was a few interesting things from this Game 4 between the Oilers and Golden Knights. Hits, questionable slashes, a suspension for Darnell Nurse. Hit me with your take on this Darnell Nurse suspension. One game.
Yeah, that's just the thing. That's the rules in the NHL, and that's the rules in hockey. If you instigate a fight in the last minute of the hockey game, the last 5 minutes of the hockey game, last 5 minutes of the hockey game, you're going to get suspended at least one game. And that was just brewing all night long between Hag and Darnell Nurse. A lot of chirping back and forth from these teams, a bunch of penalty minutes in this game. I think there was over 50 plus penalty minutes for each team in Game 4. So this series is getting very nasty, very, very quick. And to me, I am a little bit surprised that the news of Darnell Nurse's suspension has come out already, and we've heard nothing for the Alex Pietrangelo slash on Leon Draisaitl. That's what's got me frustrated right now. And I understand the Darnell Nurse suspension. It happened in the last 5 minutes. He went right down there, right towards Haig, and just dropped the gloves immediately. I completely understand that. But when you look at the Alex Pietrangelo, to me, just like the fact that Pietrangelo hasn't been suspended yet, or wasn't the first one to be suspended, is ridiculous in my mind. He skated across the ice. Leon Draisaitl had already shot the puck at net. I believe, if I counted correctly, 5 seconds went by before Pietrangelo got to Draisaitl and two-hand axe sorted him in the hands, the wrist, or the upper chest area. And I was watching some Sportsnet, SportsCenter last night. And I heard Craig Button talking about this situation as well. And he was saying he's only going to get a fine. He's only going to get a fine if he were to hit him over the head or above or in the head area.
Yeah. Come on.
Then
hit his forearm.
I know. Ridiculous statement, in my opinion. He went all the way there with the intent to injure and potentially knock him out of this series, or potentially for even longer. He took a big swing at him. And he was frustrated all night long. Pietrangelo was getting bodied by Evander Kane, by Draisaitl, by Warren Foegele, and he was taking some big hits as well. So at the end of the game, he was frustrated. The emotions got the best of him, but you just can't do that. It's inexcusable behavior, especially from a guy like Alex Pietrangelo, who's supposed to be one of the leaders on this team. It's inexcusable behavior. He deserves to be suspended. I'm surprised we haven't heard the news yet.
I totally actually understand the level of frustration that Pietrangelo had, because he was kind of done a little bit dirty. That Evander Kane hit, do I think that was a misconduct or anything more than that? No. little bit of a rough hit there, and I think that was the first period. Kind of wrote him on the numbers a little bit, but I think you and I have talked about that last kind of second or two while a hit's being applied, where a player turns or tweaks a little bit, and it really makes it look a lot worse. I think that was the case there with that hit. Made it look more on the numbers than it was. But this is being a chippy series, and I feel actually that the Vegas Golden Knights thought they were going to come into this series and maybe push the Edmonton Oilers around a little bit. And it looks like whenever they do that, it just plays right into that power play's hands and they just totally capitalize. But I'm with you, Steele. This is absolutely a joke already from the NHL Department of Player Safety. Once again, not being able to, if they don't protect their stars, Steele, my goodness, what kind of precedent does this set? His stick, the blade of his stick, was about to change the time on the clock on the scoreboard. That's how high up it was. That is so not okay in this league. And I understand, yes, should it be the same suspension if that's a guy with a whole dirty track record on another greasy fourth liner? I get it. But maybe even so, this is Leon Draisaitl here. What if he broke his wrist? What if he broke his wrist? Seriously, Steele, and what? Then they get 2 or 3 games? The Department of Player Safety in the NHL needs to seriously wake up, because I think I'm spot on with you with the Darnell Nurse thing. Is the rule a little bit suspect? Does that maybe need to change? Probably. But that's a suspension. 1 game, and they're going to have to wear that. The slash was just totally like,
it was vicious. It was vicious.
If I'm an Edmonton Oiler on the ice, and I know sometimes you and I, like, we didn't play pro or anything, but we remember what it's like to play hockey. If you're on the ice and that's your teammate and you know he's basically the leader in that locker room, and you see a slash like that come down on your boy, I'm absolutely going nuts. Like, I'm taking that guy right over the boards. That's just not okay. I think he deserves 2 games, in my opinion.
Look, and Connor McDavid went and did that. He went right after Pietrangelo when he saw that happen to Draisaitl, and he was very blunt and straight to the point after the game as well with his comments. I'm taking a stance here. He went after one of the best players in the world, and he went there with intent to hurt and to injure, and that's exactly what he was doing because he was so frustrated. From my perspective, I think they have to even this out. You suspend Darnell Nurse for 1 game. I think at this point you have to suspend Pietrangelo for at least 1 game, because you don't want a suspension to be the defining moment in a series. And it could be for the Edmonton Oilers going back to Vegas for game 5 if they don't have Darnell Nurse, but Vegas has. Like, we saw that in round 1 with Cale Makar. It made a difference when he was not there for that 1 game. And you just don't want a suspension like this and a series that is getting more and more chaotic as we go on and move forward to be the defining moment. So at this point, they were both very dumb plays. The Pietrangelo one was vicious. It was intent to injure. And I think he deserves to be suspended as well for game 5.
Very intrigued to see what happens there. Hopefully we'll get some news soon. Steele's on the tweets these days. Check the Twitter account. Make sure you follow. Make sure you subscribe. Drop that 5-star review, people, anywhere you're listening, and feedback. We always appreciate it. We're gonna get to this Leaf situation, Steele. You and I haven't spoke about the Leafs in a couple of days. We're gonna get there. Thank you for holding us down on spotty Wi-Fi. I'm up at the cottage again, people. You know me, I'm all over the place. But we're gonna talk about Woll and his value going into next season. We're going to also talk about some fantasy vets still holding value going into next season as well. Big time bets and game 5 previews for Friday night. Today's episode, my friends, is brought to you by eBay Motors. And you know, a championship team is all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. And it's the same for your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, you're going to head to eBay Motors. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part fits just right the first time round. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop at eBay Motors, with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Also, make sure you go check out Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers Florida and Mike DiStefano and Dave Morisuti from the Locked On Maple Leafs channel as well. We are all a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And our team, the Toronto Maple Leafs flip, held on. They're still in the postseason still down 3-1 against the Florida Panthers. But nonetheless, what a big changing moment, a big turning moment for the Maple Leafs. It is a big moment. Joseph Woll, he will be in the crease for Game 5. Samsonov still unavailable after, taking that collision from Luke Shen in Game 4 early on in the second period. But what are your thoughts with Joseph Woll starting Game 5? What were your thoughts with him and how he stood out in Game 4 as well? I thought he was incredible to come in this situation and stand on his head like that.
I think what we've been saying in a few moments, Steele, I'm going to let the Wi-Fi catch up here for a sec, just in case that the choppiness is getting in there, because I gotta take ready to spout off a little bit for this Maple Leaf situation. We've been talking about at length someone seizing the moment, someone seizing an opportunity and really doing something at this platform of the Stanley Cup playoffs, which is obviously a huge one. And here you go with a rookie goaltender who has been sensational all season long. Joseph Woll has been great in the AHL. He's 8-1, I believe, in the NHL this season. And why not him? He looked very calm. He had the benefit of the best defensive effort, I think, from the Maple Leafs so far this postseason? Yes, he did. And that's obviously going to make him look a lot better. But kudos to the rookie goaltender, and I hope that he can continue to seize this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm there right with you. And right when we jumped into this conversation, you made that comment about potentially seeing him with the Maple Leafs next year. I could easily see Woll with the Maple Leafs he most definitely probably will be a backup for the Maple Leafs.
In my opinion, he will be,
season. Yeah, you've got Samsonov. He's going to become an RFA next year. Murray's got 1 year left at $4.6 million. At least one of them will be gone. Hopefully it's Murray instead of Samsonov. I hope they re-sign Samsonov and, figure out what to do with Matt Murray. It's just the injury bug with this guy is just too legit. It's scary to deal with. But nonetheless, Woll will be with the Toronto Maple Leafs next year. Like you said, he was great. He was great at Boston College for 3 years. The save percentage went up. The goals against average went down every single year. He was improving his game. Like you said, with the Toronto Marlies as well, since 2021, he's been unreal with the Toronto Marlies. And looking at the small sample size that we've got from him, I believe he's only played 11 games total in the NHL the last 2 years. Yeah. Just this year alone, 6-1-0, a .932 save percentage. He had a .928 save percentage with the Marlies this year. And then he comes into a series, he comes into the playoffs, already down. His team's down in the series. Samsonov gets injured. He has to jump in. He allows 3 goals halfway through a game, and they lost. It wasn't at all his fault. Poor effort from the defensive group. But then he actually starts his first game in the postseason, goes 24 for 25 and a .960 save percentage to squeak out a win against the Florida Panthers and get the Leafs going and their season going as well. So he's played phenomenally. I like him so far right now.
I do too, Steele, and I think just honestly, next season, the Toronto Maple Leafs really don't care who's in net, realistically. Yeah, I think they should bring Samsonov back for sure, give him another shot. His ability, I think, is he's just really starting to get there in terms of an everyday NHL goaltender who can take you there. But why not Joe Woll as well in the mix? He's done nothing but proven that he can be a calm and collected goaltender. And at the end of the day, I think the stat was, Steele, by the way, how am I on the Wi-Fi here, pal? How's the connection?
Yeah, you're doing good.
All right, we're hanging in there. Okay, much love. But 2 shots allowed at 5-on-5 in Game 4 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And my last take on this situation, Steele, and maybe we'll talk a little bit in a sec when we tee it up, but I want to talk about these fantasy veterans that we're liking heading into next season, and we're going to get to bets at the end of the show. But the Toronto Maple Leafs set the tone defensively, and one of the things that we knew we needed an answer from were the big guns. And for a while there, I was a little bit worried about Mitchy Marner. He looked not confident, didn't look like Mitch Marner of what we needed to see. And then all of a sudden, he started to break through. I'm just a little bit wary, Steele, about this guy's mental state sometimes. He's just so talented when he can play his game. He gets a little bit of a cheeky goal, but that's good. We'll take it. he needs to continue the way he played near the end of that game. If he can play like that in game 5, I think the Leafs have a good shot here at maybe, no, I don't know about the series, but at least taking this one to a game 6.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. You need those top guys to step up. They did. You got Nylander and Marner on the board.
We'll
First
talk more
goal
about
of the
that after
second
the break,
round
though.
series. We'll get to the Toronto Maple Leafs later in the break because, of course, big-time bets. But we got to get over to these top aging fantasy pieces, veteran pieces for next year. I've got 5 guys on my list, Flip.
Whoa.
If you don't mind, I'll just rattle off the first 2. I'll make it real
Fire
quick
off a couple,
you. First guy I've gotten here, great player to draft, in the middle to lower rounds of the fantasy draft. He gets the job done. First year with the Detroit Red Wings, David Perron, 35 years old, goes out 55, 60 points a season. He's physical. He likes to hit. He's great for banger leagues. He's always putting up 60, 70 plus penalty minutes in a season as well. And he's shooting the puck more as well. He hasn't put over 195 shots on net. This is the first year to do it. He hasn't done it since 2014. So he's shooting the puck a little bit more. He's been a physical guy his entire career. He's great for banger leagues. He's great on the power play unit as well, whether he's on the first or second unit. But a guy at 35 years old who can kind of move around from the third and second line and put up 55, 60 points a year, he's a win in my book, especially for a deep fantasy league. And yeah, if you can get him in the 14th, 13th round, somewhere around there, I think you're absolutely golden.
Yeah, he can get streaky too. Perron is one of those guys that you're either like enamored with or you're wondering if you should drop him. I think you and I were a little premature on our predictions for the Red Wings next season. I think they have pieces to do. Obviously, goaltending those caveats, but I'm with you, Steele. He's a savvy guy that if you can get him at the right time. I'm just a little bit worried about those feet starting to really fade on him. His foot speed and his skating ability obviously is his biggest weakness, but the hands are still good. So if you can get him at the right round, why not? Who else you got?
Exactly. Same goes for this guy right here. I picked him up like halfway through the season last year, and he remained on my team all the way until the end. So Michael Backlund, 34 years old of the Calgary Flames. I like this player a lot. It wasn't a guy that I drafted, just picked him up off the waiver wire, and he was playing great all year. I just had to keep him. He had his best year to date as well, 56 points in 82 games. He's a worker bee for the Flames. He can move up and down the lineup, second line center, third line winger, it doesn't matter, but he's been there for his entire career. He works wherever you put him. Like I said, he's just a worker bee, and he's one of those guys that can just elevate his teammates and his line mates' ability every single game. He takes his fair share of penalties as well, so he's a little bit good for banger leagues. He was a plus 24 this past season, 260 shots, over 100 hits as well, and he's a dual threat both on the second power play unit and first penalty kill. This guy gets a ton of shorthanded points every single season, and that helps for fantasy leagues. So both David Perron and Michael Backlund I really like right now.
Yeah, both of those guys too, Steele. You might not even necessarily have to draft them. Those might be those kind of go-tos right off the waiver wire that you're looking to because you can almost bank on their ability to, at times, really just fill out the stat sheet for you. Because I think depending on the format, I would maybe look to draft Perron in the later stages, like you said. Backlund, you can probably get, like, if it's a keeper dynasty, he's worth a look. But, in those maybe you're just year-to-year leagues, you can probably add him off the waiver wire after the first couple of weeks. Let me fire off a player very quickly, Steele, and we'll come back for these previews and bets if you're okay with that. I got a couple of guys here, and I think the one that I wanted to mention off the top is one that also had a pretty solid postseason in Hans Kopitar. This guy is just an absolute class act. He's one of those players that I think if you're modeling your game after as a young player who doesn't get enough, you want to go under the radar, you want to impress your coaches, you want to impress the scouts, you play your game and you're off the ice mentality like Hans Kopitar. This guy is just an absolute stud. 28 goals, 46 assists this season, 87 block shots, 68 hits, chips in a little bit of everywhere. Steele, you don't hate that value when a guy is so consistent offensively, when he can also bring that value at, and I don't have his age up here very quickly. He has been in the NHL for a number of seasons, and I don't think still he gets that credit. Hold on here.
He's 35 years old.
35 years old, an 11th overall draft pick, two-time Selke winner. This guy is a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, and headed into next season, still draftable, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's on my list as well. I'll get to him just a little bit. But thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button, and we appreciate all the love and support every single day. Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. But you're right. Anze Kopitar, he's on my list as well. He has to be 35 years old, 74 points in 82 games. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised at how well he's still doing, because if you look at the last 4 years, his point total has kind of dropped off. His stats kind of dropped off. 60 to 64 points the last 4 years after that 92-point season.
Still
and
solid,
the way I was looking at it, it's still so solid, but I was a little bit worried because, you know, his line mates, his teammates were faster. He was getting slower. Was he going to be able to keep up with those guys like Kevin Fiala and Adrian Kempe, even Quinton Byfield now, and those type of players? But he doesn't have to keep up with them. The great thing about Kopitar and his style of game and his play is that he just puts himself in the right position, in the right spot every single time on the power play. 5-on-5, he's an absolute guru out there. But he just puts himself in the best position possible to jump on the rebound, to set up his teammates, or make that extra pass just to set up his teammates. So the way that he plays the game and his leadership ability, you're right, just an undeniable fantasy value guy that just brings fantasy value at this age is unreal. Couple of guys before we get to big time bets, I just got to mention them real quick.
Yeah, I got two more quick too.
I got Brent Burns over here, 38 years old, 61 points, 40 hits, 80 blocks, still gets it done, and he's playing great right now in the postseason for Carolina. And of course, this last wonderful man who will remain on my fantasy hockey team for next year in my dynasty league, Claude Giroux, 35 years old. 35 goals, 79 points in his first season with Ottawa. It's only his second time scoring 30-plus goals in a season, actually. Yeah. But he was just unreal for the Senators this year, playing with Tkachuk and DeBrincat and all of those other guys. You know, hopefully he'll be able to play with Josh Norris a little bit more next year. But nonetheless, Claude Giroux at 35 years old, scoring 35 goals, just doing all of this with a team that is on the brink of being a legitimate threat. I love it. I love his contract, and I love Claude Giroux.
Yeah, he's been feeling that home cooking for sure, and just a really good setup for him to go back to. And I'm glad that you had Giroux, because he definitely deserved to be on this list. And I think this is why I love doing this show with you, Steele, because when I miss, you pick up the pieces and vice versa. Because at 35 years old, I think the best player on this list, and the guy still holding the most value, you know, I couldn't miss out on my boy number 87 with 33 goals and 60 assists. Sidney Crosby somehow continues to get better. 93 points at 35 years old for Sid. And basically the main reason that team hung in down the stretch with goalies dropping like flies, injuries, and poor performances, who was the main consistent? Captain Clutch, baby. Sidney Crosby at 87. And he's a guy that, you know, I have in my Keeper Dynasty League. And I went through, you know, fought tooth and nail to get him a number of seasons ago. We've talked about what do you do with him. You could sell him now and get a number of pieces. I'm going to hang on to Sid, because as much as I don't know, you and I haven't talked too much about what we think for Pittsburgh next year. It might be a really tough year for Pittsburgh. That Eastern Conference, you know, we're going to expect step outs from the Red Wings, from the Senators, Islanders again. I just don't know where they fit in. So maybe that's an issue, but I think Sid is still bringing that value, Steele, and he's got to be right there at the top of my list for veteran players next season, still holding value.
Oh, he brings a ton of value, not just for fantasy hockey, but of course, big time bets as well. The anytime assists from Sidney Crosby, I swear,
you know, I love
it banged out at least. It bangs out 9 out of 10 times, it seems like. I think there was one time it didn't, but nonetheless, he is a go-to for big-time bets, and that's exactly where we're going right now. Yes, big-time bets. 2 games on the docket for Friday night. Of course, Game 5, Toronto Maple Leafs and Florida Panthers. Game 5 action, Edmonton Oilers and Vegas Golden Knights. Flip, I'll throw it over to you. 2 very crucial games here.
Yeah.
Panthers on the brink of knocking out the Toronto Maple Leafs, and someone from that Oilers Golden Knights trying to take a 3-2 series lead. Where are you looking, and what is your first pick of the night?
Well, let's start with the Leafs and Panthers because we were pretty brief with our take on it. And I think that the Toronto Maple Leafs, when they play their game, and I know the first couple of games didn't go their way. Game 3, they totally didn't show up.
Yeah.
And they squeak one out. Let's be realistic. Toronto media all over the news today. Solid all-around performance, solid defense performance. Okay, they won by 1 goal, and that could have easily gone the other way. So I think we need to maybe wake up a little bit because that could have been a sweep, Steele. That could have easily been a sweep. The Toronto Maple Leafs need to, I said all at length, seize the moment here. So let's start with this situation with the Leafs. For me at home, a little bit of confidence here for Willie, a little bit of confidence from Mitch, and a really good defensive performance. This team changed the narrative this year by doing what? Playing stingy, defensive, clamp down performances. And I think if they can now bottle what they did in game 4 still defensively, it's going to be tricky for this Florida Panthers team to do what they do in front of the net. And they got to get to Bob. More shots on Bob, and I think they'll be just fine. That's a long preamble to tell you Maple Leafs money line minus 175. That's my first pick.
That's also my first pick, actually, as well. Leafs on the money line minus 175. I'm there with you. I just think in this situation, back at home, it was a.
They have struggled a bit at home in the postseason, just saying.
Yeah, they have struggled at home, but this entire series has been 1-goal games. I thought the first 2 games, like they weren't blown out of the water. Just Florida had a lot of momentum coming out of them after that big, confidence. And I don't think they got blew out of the water in the first 2 games. Game 3, they just didn't show up. It was just brutal hockey to watch. But the first 2 games, every single game has been a 1-goal game. So Leafs on the money line, that's my first pick. But I'm also going with the Austin Matthews anytime goal plus 100. We just saw Marner and Nylander get their first of this series. I think Tavares and Matthews are up next. And again, it goes back to this statement that he's had his opportunities. It's not like he's not shooting the puck. It's not like he's not picking those corners. Sergei Bobrovsky is just there at the same time, making some unreal saves. So Matthews has had those opportunities. He just needs to capitalize and get the puck a little bit quicker there before Bobrovsky can catch it. So Matthews anytime goal at plus 100. My lock of the night.
Here we go.
Oilers, Golden Knights under 6.5 at plus 118.
Whoa.
It's been some crooked numbers, but 3 out of the 4 games have been under the number.
Yep. Stayed under.
Yeah. So it's back in Vegas. As of right now, Vegas has Pietrangelo and the Edmonton Oilers don't have Nurse. I think that plays obviously a little bit of a favor in the Vegas Golden Knights' hands, but it's also just been back and forth.
Yep.
First game was 6-4 Vegas. Next game was 5-1 Edmonton. Next game was 5-1 Vegas. Then it was 4-1. So now it's Vegas's turn back at home. It's going to be a 4-1, 4-2 type of game.
I like it, Steele. And before I get to my lock of the night, this game, that over-under is something that I actually looked at long and hard. I actually was leaning the over, but I think just both teams kind of need to tighten it up. Obviously, only 1 goal allowed by Stuart Skinner last game, but I think they have an opportunity here, Steele. And if with Darnell Nurse out as well, I think Evan Bouchard is going to have to continue to step up, and he's going to eat some more minutes.
Yeah.
And that's where my second pick lies. And I was looking at the anytime point for Bouchard, and because of how hot he's been, there's no value there. So give me the over 1.5 points. It means a 2+ point night for Evan Bouchard. Odds are not out yet, but I think he's going to get another couple assists, goal and assist, shot from the point. They're just getting that separation now on the power play. Draisaitl and obviously McDavid creating it. And he's just stepped right into that role. I've talked about it at length. I don't need to go down that rabbit hole, even though it's a good one if you're an Evan Bouchard fan headed into next season, because, oh my goodness, he's about to explode. And lock of the night, Steele. I'm feeling it, man. I've ride by this Edmonton Oilers team. I think they're going to seize the moment here. They've got a little bit of confidence going. Oilers money line minus 130. That's my lock of the night.
I like that. Going big on the road in Vegas. I'm there with you. It's going to be an intense Friday night for these Canadian teams, Toronto Maple Leafs and Edmonton Oilers in action. But thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, where you can find it on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. And again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again on Monday.
Peace.